All right. Okay. Good evening, members of the panel, distinguished doctors, medical professionals, ladies and gentlemen. A very warm and hearty welcome to our panel discussion on demystifying wheat-related disorders. A recent statistic, a little over 2019, it puts Indian wheat production at number 2 in the world, as per the Food and Agriculture Association, at 103.6 million metric tons. It puts our consumption at number 3 behind China and the EU at about 99,000 million metric tons. However, if we look at the number of wheat-related disorders, they remain at a very low level. Simply put, I would say a lack of awareness has contributed majorly to this low level of disorders because most of them remain undiagnosed. At JMitra, our goal with this webinar is an increase in awareness on the subject of wheat-related disorders. And before we begin, let me give you a little disclaimer here that this webinar is intended solely to provide guidance, information, and we at JMitra and the Celiac Society in India have no commercial interests here. The information presented as part of this webinar and any material published in relation to this webinar are for general purposes only. They should not be construed as professional medical advice, though we have medical professionals speaking here, since each case would be different. And the presenters or the sponsors of the webinar or any of their respective affiliates should not be held responsible for the views expressed, since they come directly from the individuals here. Right? Professional medical advice should be sought before any action is taken with relation to any information disseminated during this webinar. Right? And having got that out of the way, a very warm and welcome to our panelists and our moderator for the evening, Dr.Arjun Dang. Dr. Dang, the forum is yours. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that introduction. And we are super excited to be starting this session today. I'm sure it's 6:02 p.m. right now on a cold evening in Delhi, but I'm sure the next hour is going to fly by. So without wasting much time, let's jump right into it. And firstly, a very warm welcome to everyone who's joined us today. And I'm sure all of you already know Ms.Ishi Khosla and Dr. Tom OBryan. But just to get this started, I'll just have a brief bio for both of them. So Dr. Tom OBryan, like all of you are already aware, is an internationally recognized, admired and compassionate speaker focusing on food sensitivity, environmental toxins, and the development of autoimmune diseases. Some people also refer to Dr. Tom as the Sherlock Holmes for chronic diseases and teaches that recognizing and addressing the underlying mechanism that activates an immune response is the map towards the highway for good health. He holds teaching faculty positions with the Institute of Functional Medicine and the National University of Health Sciences. He has trained and certified tens of thousands of practitioners around the world in advancing understanding of the impact of wheat sensitivity and the development of individual autoimmune diseases. He is the founder of the Dr.Tom and the visionary behind the Gluten Summit, a grain of truth, bringing together 29 of the world's experts on the gluten connection to diseases, disorders, and a wide range of symptoms and ages. His 2016 groundbreaking book, winner of the National Book Award and ranked #1 in several categories on Amazon.com, The Autoimmune Fix, outlines the step-by-step development of diseases that gives the tools to identify our disease process years before the symptoms are obvious, and how to turn your health around one step at a time. Thank you, Dr. Tom, for having joined us. It's an absolute privilege having you here.
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Dang. It's my honor.
Thank you, Dr. Tom. Coming to Ms.Ishi Khosla, I'm sure all of you tuned in from the city of Delhi and Delhi NCR are well versed with Ishi ma'am, and a very, very good evening. Ma'am, and thank you for joining us. Ms.Ishi Khosla is a practicing clinical nutritionist, columnist, author, and entrepreneur and researcher, and also a wonderful cook. I think that information only I know. And she is actively involved in clinical practice at the Center for Dietary Counseling in Delhi, where she deals with a wide range of nutrition-related health problems, including obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular diseases, digestive disorders, food allergies, intolerances, etc. As part of a commitment towards public health and community nutrition, Ms. Khosla founded the Celiac Society of India, the first of its kind in India to spread awareness about gluten-related disorders in India and internationally as well. She lectures extensively, is a TEDx speaker, and is invited frequently to radio and television programs. She has authored many books, among them Are Eating at Work, The Diet Doctor, Is Wheat Killing You, and The Cholesterol Facts. She's also been awarded with the Women's Achievers Award in the field of nutrition by the Imperial and Cancer Patients AIDS Association and Jijabai Women's Achiever Award. She has been felicitated by the President of India for work in the field of nutrition. She has also been listed among the 25 most powerful women in the country by the India Today group. Thank you, Ms. Khosla, for taking out time to be with us today. It's an absolute pleasure to have you. So jumping right in, I will quickly start with questions because I did try to take down some notes and draft some questions for today's seminar. But I think by the end of it, the questions were so many and time so little. So this is actually going to be like a rapid fire because I have a lot of questions. Actually, a lot of people who were looking forward to today's session also emailed me some questions. Some of the patients that I have also WhatsApped me a few. So do excuse me if I miss out any questions, but I'm going to try and cover maximum. So starting with Dr. Tom. So Dr. Tom, one thing that is very common in India is that, like, I'll give you an example. So my grandfather, and he was a practicing physician. We lost him a year back, but he was a renowned physician in the 1940s and 50s in the circles of Delhi. And even last time when we did the International Symposium on Wheat-related disorders, I was trying to explain to him what are wheat-related disorders, and basically what we call wheat in India is basically like a chapati. It's like an Indian form of a bread. And I was telling him that we are discussing disorders related to this particular chapati. And he actually was very shocked and surprised. And he actually asked me that, Arjun, I have practiced medicine for decades and decades and cured millions of people. And every day I've gone back home and eaten the same gluten and the same wheat. And everyone around me has done that. So what has really changed over the years? How can you be hosting an international symposium on the same? So Dr. Tom, please explain to us basically what are the key differences between celiac disease and non-celiac wheat sensitivity that we call as NCWS. How did the entire grain over the years, has the grain changed or has the human biome changed? Could you enlighten us about that? And also, why is NCWS not called non-celiac gluten sensitivity? Because I've read a lot about NCGS and that also puzzles me. And also, just we'll start with this.
Do we have 5 hours? The first thing to understand is that in general principles, wheat is a minor irritant. Yeah, your body really shouldn't have it. We have the same body as our ancestors thousands and thousands of years ago. Our kidneys work the same. Our lungs work the same. Our immune system works the same. And one of the primary concerns for our ancestors was to find food. And they'd walk around there looking for food. They'd find something and they would pick it up. They'd smell it. They'd nibble a little bit for taste, and then they'd eat it. And if there was bad bacteria on that food, but not enough to make it smell bad, then when that food comes out of the stomach into the first part of the small intestine, we have sentries standing guard to protect us from anything coming out of the stomach that wants to get further in the body. And the sentries, when they see a bad bacteria, when they see the protein structure of a threat, they fire their chemical bullets to destroy that. That's really important for us. And we know that you're not supposed to eat fruit or vegetables that have a lot of mold on them, that's not good for you and it can make you very sick. It's the same concept that if there's a danger coming out of the stomach into the first part of the small intestine, the sentry standing guard, and the technical term is toll-like receptor 4. But I'm sorry, the geek terms. But the toll-like receptor 4 fires a chemical bullet to destroy that bug, that bacteria. The problem now, and science has improved so much over the last 20 years that we now know that the protein structure of wheat coming out of the stomach into the first part of the small intestine, your immune system, the sentry standing guard, sees that those wheat particles coming out and it's, oh, a bug, and it fires its chemical bullets. So it misinterprets wheat as a harmful component of a microorganism. And there is many studies on this now. You can't argue with this. This is science. We can, in our mind, say, well, I'm fine when I eat wheat. I don't feel bad. And we're trying to justify, but when you read the science, it's very clear. And this happens in every human who consumes wheat. Every human. This is our normal reaction. But it's a minor irritant. So the immune system creates some inflammation to kill what it thinks is a bug, it's wheat, and it causes a temporary or transient leaky gut. And this happens every time the immune system gets activated to fight wheat, every time, but it's minor, it's transient. Now we know that you have an entire new body every 7 years, every cell in your body regenerates, every cell. Brain cells, every cell regenerates. Some are very fast, like the inside lining of the gut is every couple of days. Some are very slow, like brain cells, but every cell regenerates to make a new cell, a fresh cell. So when you eat wheat, you cause temporary leaky gut, but then it heals. Fastest growing cells in the body, inside lining of the gut, every couple, 3 days. So you eat wheat for breakfast, you tear the lining of the gut, but it heals. You eat wheat at lunch, you tear the lining of the gut, but it heals. Now your gut is 20 feet long. So there's so many places along there, tear the lining, it heals, tear the lining, it heals, until one day you don't heal anymore. Now you've got the inflammation in your gut that causes the leaky gut to be more pathological. And we know that it's the leaky gut that is the gateway into the development of chronic inflammatory diseases, whether it's diabetes or Alzheimer's or heart disease or multiple sclerosis, rheumatoid arthritis, any of the chronic inflammatory diseases, the gateway in their development is through the leaky gut. And the leaky gut changes from being transient. Every time you eat wheat and then it heals, every time you eat wheat and it heals, every time you eat wheat and it heals, until one day it doesn't heal anymore. And that's now the pathological leaky gut that leads to the inflammation throughout your body that is the primary contributor, the #1 mechanism for the development of diabetes, which is such a big problem in India, or any of the autoimmune diseases. To your second question, why are we talking about non-celiac wheat sensitivity and not gluten sensitivity? It's because we first learned about this component in wheat called gluten, and that it caused this leaky gut, all this inflammation, that gluten causes that. But now we know it's not just gluten. There are components in wheat that are very good for you, but there are many components in wheat that are not good for you. And the components that are not good for you outnumber the good components. So it's not just the gluten proteins, it's also what are called amylase trypsin inhibitors, the lectins of wheat called wheat germ agglutinins. They cause strokes and miscarriages and many, many different problems. So we know it's not just gluten. So if you test for gluten and your immune system says, no, gluten's okay, it doesn't mean that wheat is okay, because it could be that your body is reacting to the amylase trypsin inhibitors or to the wheat germ agglutinins and not to the glutens. So gluten is a component of wheat, a very important component to test for, but there are other components of wheat that we also have to look at, because every human has the same reaction to wheat. It's a minor irritant. It's kind of like if you get a mosquito bite, you know, it's an annoyance. It's a minor irritant, but your body heals from that. But eventually, when you have this inflammation in your gut, you change the microbiome. And that's really the big picture. And Ishi Khosla will talk about how do you build a healthy microbiome, you know, and that's really where the rubber meets the road, is that we need a healthy microbiome to protect us so that the transient response to wheat doesn't become a pathological response to wheat.
No, wonderfully explained, Dr. Tom, and always enjoy your sessions because the way you explain things is just so wonderful. It's hard to forget it in the future. But coming to you, Ms. Khosla, so again, jumping right in, I do remember you telling me, I think a few years back when we were chatting, and you did say that there's this list of universal allergens, and probably gluten falls as one of them. Correct me if I'm wrong. And a lot of people come to me and also ask me that, is a gluten-free diet actually healthy? And even if they are on a gluten-free diet, they might ask about cheating on their diet, and they say, okay, we are on a gluten-free diet, but on the weekend we want to go and dine out with our family or have something nice at home. So can we cheat? How much gluten is too much gluten? And what is this entire issue of cross-contamination? If you can answer these questions. You're on mute, Ms. Khosla.
Yeah, great questions, Arjun. The first is a gluten-free diet a healthy diet? So I'll make a generic remark here that, you know, in general, we have a tendency as practitioners and as researchers to oversimplify facts, especially to do with nutrition and food. For example, we related sugar with diabetes, we related salt with hypertension, fat and cholesterol with heart disease, and we went on a absolute mission to get these corrected so that we thought we would arrest these, and nothing like that happened. In fact, even calories, we thought we will go on a low-calorie diet or burn more calories and deal with obesity, but nothing like that happened. So simple oversimplification of any science can lead to problems, and this is also true with gluten. So just removal of gluten alone is not going to make you healthy. It is meant to be removed, and actually having gluten or having a leaky gut is associated with malnutrition, with malabsorption, and several other conditions like Dr. Tom just mentioned. And it's obviously logical that when we remove that irritant, it should translate into better absorption and better nutritional status. But it may happen, it may not happen, because it depends on what kind of a gluten-free diet and what kind of alternatives you are choosing. Clearly, if I replace my chapati with rice, which is polished, or I buy a processed, say a cracker or a biscuit or any bakery product which has gluten alternatives, it may not have the right ingredients. And more often than not, we do find additives and highly refined starches which are low on nutrition as alternatives and ingredients in these products. And that's where the problem starts. So simply elimination of gluten is not going to do it, like I'm repeating. And in general, Good health is arrived not by removing harmful products from your diet, but also by adding useful products. So that is very, very important. And therefore, choosing the right alternatives and having a healthy gluten-free diet, which really means plenty of vegetables, plenty of fruits, plenty of good fats, prebiotics, probiotics, and fiber, is critical to a diet which is central to a gluten-free diet. Arjun, you do lab work. How many vegetarians do you see with good lipid profiles, with healthy profiles? Doesn't happen. So just being vegetarian is not going to do it. So likewise, just being gluten-free is not going to do it. A healthy gluten-free diet, which has adequate proteins, like I just mentioned, good fats, fiber, phytonutrients, antioxidants, etc., and a good lifestyle is critical. So make sure you make the right choices when you are on a gluten-free diet. Question 2 was on can you just
cross-contamination,
right? So cross-contamination is an excellent question, because we do see that as an important part when people are on a gluten-free diet and are not healing or not getting the right kind of results. It starts from simply flour mills, where we grind our grains. So in India, for instance, alternatives to wheat include millets, bajra, jowar, ragi. All of these are mostly being ground in mills which are also using wheat. And that makes it contaminated and adds the element of gluten, which can be causing continued symptoms. To be very precise, a level of less than 20 parts per million is considered gluten-free. So clearly these will never meet that standard and can be a problem. So cross-contamination from the ingredients to wherever you are producing your food, your own kitchen, where products could be, the dusters could be common, the working surfaces, the tawas, the pans, all of that could be contaminated, or toasters on other equipment like that could be causing the cross-contamination. So it's a very simple, common sense way of dealing with a complete exclusion and completing the hygiene to 100% as far as possible to ensure that cross-contamination is minimized. And cross-reactivity. Did you ask me about cross-reactivity?
Yes, that's
so, yeah. So that again is something to do with the immune system. In a certain way, the antigen is getting the antibody response, which was meant for some other food, and the antigen is getting the same response. So it's to a certain extent molecular mimicry. It is falsely being attacked. So a lot of foods that we consider safe as gluten-free can be behaving like gluten because they trigger the same immune response by the body. And they, so for instance, corn, soya, oats, even there are some minor grains, amaranth, which are gluten-free and very healthy. And they do evoke the same reaction. So it's important for anyone who is on a gluten-free diet to understand the science. And very often, these are also part of gluten-free products internationally because they are listed as gluten-free and they are gluten-free. And mostly we find that they are triggers for most people. So it's important to understand this concept that just simply going gluten-free may not be, causing complete remission of your health condition.
That's very, very enlightening, Ms. Khosla. Actually, I have patients who come to me and get their TTD checked on follow-up, and it's always elevated and they're always helpless. But it's very helpful for them to understand how to avoid these cross-contamination and probably go at the root of how the grain is actually being produced to the mill. So Dr. Tom, coming to you, again, me being from a diagnostic world, I have a lot of questions related to diagnosis. But in India currently, the two most commonly used tests to diagnose celiac or any kind of gluten sensitivity is obviously a TTG IgA that we do for screening, and an anti-endomysial and a DGP. that we do. So actually, there are a lot of other tests also that are available. And what is the best way actually to use TTG, IgA, and anti-endomysial and DGP? And also, I do believe that these tests are not able to detect or diagnose the condition till a certain period of time. Now we are also hearing about a lot of new tests and also about things like zonulin peptide and secretory IgA and other things. So could you first please just take us through what is the best way of interpreting this TTG, IgA, and anti-endomysial and DGP? And also another very frequent question that we get, that people who always test borderline on the TTG, for example, our cutoff is 20, and suppose someone keeps getting like a 17, 18 type value, but they do have symptoms that are unexplained. And do we then classify them as celiac, and should they go off gluten? So I'll just reiterate my question. So firstly, what is the best way and the utility of TTG, IgA, and anti-endomysial and DGP? And what are the new tests that all of us should learn about and hopefully will be available in India very soon? Dr. Tom, you're on mute, please.
Okay. To begin with, we have to understand that recognizing the dangers in eating wheat came through the understanding of a disease called celiac disease. And that happened in the 1940s, 1950s. Actually, it happened over 2,000 years ago with Aretaeus the Cappadocian that first identified this mechanism. But it was in the late 1940s, after World War II, that a doctor noticed that children who lived in the cities, they didn't get as much rickets during World War II. That's a disease of the bones from malnutrition. And they weren't as emaciated with bloated bellies the way during the war many children were. But after the war ended, within a couple of years, the frequency of children having that kind of reaction came back very high again. And doctors were baffled by this. And one doctor figured it out. There was no wheat during World War II. There was no bread. And so the children stopped eating bread. But after the war, when bread came back again, they started eating bread. And then the vulnerable children had the same disease where they looked really skinny, emaciated with bloated bellies, and they were sick all the time. And they recognized celiac disease. So all of the science in the 1960s and 1970s was based on looking at this condition of celiac disease, and they associated it directly with eating wheat. There's no question. Wheat is the trigger that causes celiac disease. There are literally thousands of studies on that. The problem is, it's not the only manifestation of a problem with wheat, but it's the first one that was recognized. And so every doctor knows if you have a problem with wheat, it's celiac disease. That's how they were trained. But many doctors still think that if you don't have celiac disease, you don't have a problem with wheat. But that's not true. And there are hundreds and hundreds of studies on non-celiac wheat sensitivity and non-celiac gluten sensitivity. So the first thing to understand is that it's a much bigger picture of how a problem with wheat can manifest itself, not just as celiac disease. Very important to recognize if someone has celiac disease, but it's not the only way that a person can get sick is with celiac. So once we understand that, now we can look at the tests. So TTG, tissue transglutaminase, is the test of choice, and endomysium, EMA, those two are the tests of choice to identify celiac disease. They are not the tests to identify a problem with wheat overall. They're very accurate to identify celiac disease. Now, in general, about 1 out of 100 people will develop celiac disease. But we now know, because of the testing that's available, 7 to 8 out of 10 or 70 to 80 out of 100 will develop non-celiac wheat sensitivity. So it's much more prevalent to have symptoms outside of celiac disease from a problem with wheat, much more prevalent. So with that, my son just came in to say hello. Okay. With that understanding, now we can look at the testing. So doctors confuse testing with TTG as being a test for wheat. It is not a test for wheat sensitivity. It is a test for celiac disease, which comes from a wheat sensitivity. But there are other manifestations of a wheat sensitivity, not just celiac. So TTG is a very accurate test, and endomysium, very accurate test for celiac disease. But we also have to understand, how did they determine that these tests are accurate for celiac disease? Well, they got the blood of many patients who were diagnosed with celiac disease, and then they looked to see, was TTG elevated? And they found that yes, almost every time a patient has celiac disease, the TTG is elevated. And the technical terms is sensitivity and specificity. It's very high, 97, 98, 99% accurate. Almost every single time it will identify celiac disease. But here's the problem with that. All of the people who they checked their blood work who had celiac disease, all of them had been diagnosed with celiac disease. That means, now celiac disease is a disease that happens over many years. You don't wake up one morning and you have celiac disease. It's a wearing down. It's like letting a little bit of air out of your tire every day, just a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. And in the gut, these villi, they wear down, they wear down, they wear down, they wear down, they wear down. And now when the villi are gone, you have celiac disease. So the test is very, very accurate to identify celiac disease. But what if somebody, their tire is very low on air, but it's not flat yet? And that's called partial villus atrophy. It hasn't worn out completely. There's still some villi there. Then the test is not very accurate at all. Somewhere between 27 to 32% accuracy. So when you have total villus atrophy, when the villi have worn down completely and you have the malabsorption that Ishi Khosla was talking about, and the malabsorption because all of the equipment to absorb your nutrients is worn down, flat tire, it's completely flat. The tests are very accurate for celiac disease. But if you're partial celiac, they're not accurate at all. So we have to understand when we're doing the blood test, if it comes back and it's negative, it doesn't mean you don't have a problem with wheat. It just means that you haven't worn down the villi completely yet. Your tire's not completely flat, but you certainly can have a tire that's low on air, which would be partial villus atrophy. And that's the problem with the blood test, looking for celiac disease. It's very accurate when you're at the end stage and your tire is flat. It is very, very accurate, but it's not accurate. Unfortunately, it's not accurate. So with the testing that's available in India right now, you can identify the end stage very accurately, but you cannot identify the earlier stages. So that's where the skill of the clinician is so important. The doctor or the nutritionist to say, you show the signs that you are inflamed, you have diabetes, or you have recurrent headaches, or you have skin problems. You show the signs of being inflamed. Let's do a trial period. First, let's check you for celiac disease. And the blood test is very accurate for that, total flat tire. But even if the blood test comes back negative, it doesn't mean you don't have a problem with wheat. So perhaps it's a good idea to run a trial. Let's go completely gluten-free for 3 weeks and let's see what happens. And I know the Celiac Society of India has excellent guidelines on how to do that and to work with people on that. You're on mute, Dr. Dang.
Yes, so thank you, Dr. Tom. And that was my next question, and related to the biopsy also, and that is the gold standard. But before that, quickly coming back to diet, I'm going to ask Ms.Ishi just about these 2-3 things that have always puzzled me. And so there are a lot of people who actually go off soya and corn, and that's always puzzled me. Why is that? Is that the right thing to do? The second one is this entire dilemma surrounding oats, and are they really gluten free, or there are certain that are gluten free? So should they really go for that? And then the fourth one would be, what is the status of dairy then? Are we just talking about reducing inflammation? And then does milk and dairy also play a crucial part in reducing that inflammation if we go off it? Sorry for bombarding you with so many questions, but it's only in the essence of time.
So it's not only you who is bombarded with these questions, it makes the two of us. It's my story too. And yes, the question regarding soya, corn and dairy, oats, of course, is again going back to the previous conversation that we had on cross-reactivity, that they in themselves are great grains. Soya is wonderful food. There's no denying that. Corn has its own fabulous benefits. And they have been part of very traditional diets in pockets of the world. So there's no way we can denounce these, and why we don't need to do that. However, whatever the grains are, if the immune system mistakenly attacks these or targets these as antigens and makes antibodies against them, for whatever reasons, like I tried to explain to you, like a mimic, it mimics gluten in a certain way, then they become undesirable for you. So they may, in celiac disease, we also have a few studies to suggest that corn and soya have caused villus atrophy. We don't have robust data on it, but it is there in a few studies. And science will evolve around these grains as well. So the question is not gluten here. Here there's something else, which is, like Dr. Tom said, maybe other parts of the grain, or we don't know exactly what triggers, but certainly they behave like that. And I can support that with my clinical experience. That many times, in fact, I'm reminded of a young girl in her 20s who was studying in the US college, and she was celiac. And she refused, she was doing everything right in terms of following a gluten-free diet, but she included oats in her diet as a routine, because oats are healthy again. There's nothing wrong with oats. And all the products that she ate were gluten-free technically. But she was not gaining weight and stamina, and it was almost 4 or 5 years for her to be on the diet and not getting much relief, to the point where she was not even allowed to travel outside for a course that the college was sending her, because she was so underweight and so tired. And so she landed up in my clinic first, I don't know how. And when I took her diet history, I found this was happening. And all I did was, I said, that's the only mistake you're making, and get it out and let's see how you do. And sure enough, within a few weeks, I got a thank you message from her parents that she's turned around, she's feeling better, stronger. And after a few months, she was also allowed to travel for her course. So these are things which we are seeing. It's not theory, it's practical experience. So these are certainly new learnings that we have. In fact, as a matter of fact, in my book, Is Wheat Killing You?, which I did way back in 2008, these are permitted grains. So this is new science, and we need to understand the reasons behind it, and also make our guidelines accordingly. The question on dairy is very, very important because dairy again is gluten-free, but dairy has two parts to it. One is the lactose and one is the milk protein, which is casein. Because of the leaky gut, which Dr. Tom talked about, there is what we call an imbalanced gut flora, gut microbiome, a dysbiosis, so to say, which also reduces our ability to handle certain sugars, which is like milk sugar, lactose. We may not make enough quantities of lactase in our system and in such bodies, and with certain people with certain age, we are unable to deal with the lactose in milk. So milk certainly can be an irritant for most people who have a gluten problem, but not all. Certain people are completely all right. But the question is, I would say, I can't give you an exact number by research, but roughly about 50% of people who have a gluten problem also react to dairy. And whether they are reacting to lactose or to dairy protein, which is casein, is hard to say, but it is an issue. So it has to be, we don't have guidelines to say that everyone who has a gluten problem should be off dairy, but it will have to be something that you as an individual or as a, your patient need to understand your tolerance. However, if you have certain established conditions already, like for instance, autism, or for instance, diabetes, we know that dairy is something which should not be a part of the diet. So it is early days for us to make guidelines for everybody, but certainly it is a food which needs to be taken with caution. And very often I'm asked, oh, dairy for children, calcium for their growth, and as a probiotic, how can we eliminate dairy and why should we do it? Only if we need to do it, we should do it. And at what stage it is done, it needs to be worked on. But it is not as black and white.
Thank you, Ishi, for that very, very nice answer. And I will certainly miss my frappuccino in the morning, but I think it is time to start experimenting without dairy also. So Dr. Tom, back to you and back to diagnosis again. So I did understand about TTG and about EMGL, but then what is the alternate solution that if in the initial phases we can't really pick up celiac and the person is also having symptoms that are not explained by anything else, are there any other tests available? Are there newer tests like zonulin, etc., for gut permeability that you advise? And also, we've always learned, and also from a textbook aspect, is that the gold standard is a biopsy. But then actually biopsy is not an easy procedure to get done, especially someone's from the socioeconomic group or it's a child, it's very difficult. So in these cases, can you advise me something about this?
Yes. The first thing is that biopsy is the gold standard to identify celiac disease. And if anyone is going to get a biopsy, always, always include, it's called IEL, intraepithelial lymphocytes, meaning the white blood cells. And it's inexpensive to include the IEL count. In the US, it's $40 to include it in a biopsy. But the value, and all the pathologist has to do when they snip a little piece of tissue and they look at it under a microscope, they count how many lymphocytes are in the square marked field. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If it's more than 25, you have inflammation in your gut. And it's very important to include that. It's inexpensive, but if you are going to get a biopsy, and all the doctors that are recommending biopsies, which is a good test, please include the IEL count. Because what's more important than whether your tire is completely flat or not, which is very important, but what's more important for the earlier stages of your tire is low on air is, are you inflamed? Is there inflammation in your gut? Excess inflammation, and that's what the IEL count does. Now, to your other parts of the question, yes, and we are blessed in the US now to have technology. Mayo Clinic published the first paper in 2016, 5 years ago, and they call it a new era in laboratory medicine. You know, if I had said to you, Dr. Dang, 30 years ago, if I had said, if we were friends, well, I would have been in my practice, you may have been still riding bicycles to school, I don't know, but if we were friends back 30 years ago, and I would tell you, you know, someday I'm going to hold a little black box in my hand, and I'm going to be able to tell you anything you want to know within 10 seconds. You would have looked at me and thought that I was crazy and I was watching too many Star Trek movies. But I can turn this thing on, and if I push a button or two and I click on one that's called Air Matters, I can tell you that in Spiazzo, Italy right now, the air particulate matter is 9. It's very good. In Chicago, it's 49. That's still good. But San Diego is 55. That's not so good. That's a warning zone. And I can look anywhere in the world and see what's the air quality right now. And I can do that in 5 seconds. And if I told you that 30 years ago, you would have thought that I was dreaming. The same type of technology improvements have occurred in laboratory medicine. The same type of exponential benefits have occurred. But it takes years before the laboratories can purchase the technology and purchase the equipment. But in 2016, it happened in the US. And Mayo Clinic calls it a new era in laboratory medicine. Now with one blood draw, we can look at 28 different components of wheat, not just gluten. And we can look and see, is this body's immune system fighting wheat? And if the immune system is fighting wheat, that's the end of the story. Your immune system is trying to protect you. It's fighting wheat right now. You have elevated antibodies to amylase trypsin inhibitors, or you have elevated antibodies to the omega gliadins, or you have elevated antibodies to gluteomorphins. And each one of these different components of wheat have been associated with different conditions. For example, the omega gliadins in wheat, not the glutens, the omega gliadins have been associated with people that have a wheat sensitivity that manifests as schizophrenia. Whereas if you have the gamma gliadins, it's more associated for some people, not everyone, with lung problems. That the different parts of wheat, when your immune system fights the different parts of wheat, it can manifest, as Ishi Khosla referenced, molecular mimicry, meaning the antibodies are looking for omega gliadins they're in the bloodstream, and your bloodstream is just a highway of traffic. Everything's going in the same direction, bouncing around, but it's all going in one direction. And if the antibodies are looking for omega gliadin, they can get confused and attack your brain cells. Or if it can attack the collagen in your joints and you get rheumatoid arthritis, or it can attack your skin and you get psoriasis. It just depends on what your genetic vulnerability is as to where the activated immune system may confusingly attack your own tissue. So those tests, it's called silicone chip technology. That's the technical term for it. And now there are many papers on the accuracy and the comprehensiveness of this. So we don't test for celiac disease anymore. Now it's part of the blood test called the wheat zoomer. The tissue transglutaminase is there, and the deamidated gliadins, the DGPs are there. So if that comes back positive, oh, it looks like Mrs. Patient, your weak link is vulnerability to celiac disease. Let's check that out and see how far your tire has worn down. But if they come back with the omega gliadins, we may be looking at, how is your brain function? Do you find that like you get confused at times? And we ask questions more aligned with what component of wheat their immune system is fighting. So it's a new era in laboratory medicine. And unfortunately, it's a large investment for the laboratories to buy all new equipment and create the new forms and the new interpretations. And it takes time, but it's coming. It is coming all over the world. We're blessed that in the US, it came here first. You're on mute, Dr. Dang.
Very, very interesting, Dr. Tom. A lot for me to learn also. But since we are running out of time, a quick question to Ishi. And this is one question that I get asked very regularly again. And going gluten-free has become a fad. And probably last year also, it was very popular. During the pandemic, everyone was at home and trying new diets and trying to lose weight. But is gluten-free really a good diet to lose weight? And also, second thing again is people who are celiacs and have any kind of gut permeability issues, they do come in for follow-up testing. So are there any nutritional tests or any specific tests that you would advise our patients who come in for follow-up testing?
Yes, great question here in the backdrop of the pandemic. A lot has happened with the use of antibiotics and also the shift in gut microbiome post-vaccinations and post-COVID itself, post the infection. So a lot how people have suffered on account of that. And let's not discount the effect of prolonged stress and stress-related issues, which have also been a part of the pandemic. All of that causes what we call a shift in the gut microbiome negatively. And that definitely warrants probably a shift in diet and in many people whose symptoms are not resolving or who have landed up with symptoms or conditions like diabetes, high blood pressure, and skin problems and other immune problems. I see it all the time. And my own patients who are very well controlled diabetics are not as well controlled now because of all of this. So there is a merit in looking out for food sensitivities in such patients and elimination of inflammatory proteins, particularly of in the form of gluten and dairy and the other grains we've already spoken about, is warranted. But I would suggest if it is done by anybody, it should be followed up by professional advice and not made into just a casual thing of eating it on and off or a low gluten diet. So that becomes a problem. In fact, I missed answering your question on cheating. On and off. So, and I know Dr. Tom's view on this, and I resonate with that completely, that there is nothing known as a low gluten diet or a cheat day or something as far as gluten is concerned, because here you are really trying to heal your intestines and reduce the inflammation and, correct, seal the leaky gut. So that can be completely, even with, like I said earlier, 20 parts per million, the immune system reacts. So there is little room to say yes to cheat as far as this particular aspect is concerned. But yes, you can have your favorite foods in the alternative world, absolutely, once in a while, and that's perfectly fine. So coming back to the question on, the need for doing this, look out for food sensitivities, particularly for people who have suffered, and modify your diets accordingly. And the second part of your question was on the follow-up for patients who come with these problems. We definitely need to do, there are two kinds, the celiac and the non-celiac. For celiacs, we definitely would like to monitor their TTG levels and to ensure that they are, well within the permissible levels. And, not that celiac, sometimes patients say, oh, our celiac markers are okay now, but we still have symptoms. So celiac disease markers like TTG are not very sensitive markers for contamination issues, etc., and or to tell us if there is damage going on. So that is a very important understanding by all who are listening, that just because your TTG is normal does not mean that there is no inflammation going on. So, and if you are, particularly if you're having symptoms, but we do need to ensure that these are well within normal. And along with that, I personally like to monitor antibodies to thyroid, to H. pylori, sometimes it's needed, and to ensure these are all in place. And if you have rheumatoid arthritis, etc., to work on those. But more importantly, I monitor very, very closely levels for iron and B12, vitamin B12, and vitamin D. Of course, calcium, magnesium also, but more importantly, vitamin D levels. And we have spoken a lot about inflammation in this session, and vitamin D is one of the key vitamins which helps in controlling inflammation. And Dr. Tom has a lot of good data to share if we have time on vitamin D and COVID and the immunity.
Sure.
But having said that, these are the few things which I typically do. And plus, if the patient is diabetic, and we mark, the other markers are also tracked.
Very
So,
helpful, very helpful, Ms. Khosla. And just quickly jumping to Dr. Tom, we have a bunch of questions here, and anyone who wants to ask any question can type it out. But I have this very interesting question that I'd like to ask Dr. Tom, is that how do mothers during pregnancy, is there some way that they can protect the newborn from developing any kind of wheat sensitivity? Is there something that you can share with the audience today? And then also what she was talking about the vitamin D and immunity, or vitamin D and gut health connection. I think these two questions, it will be great knowing your perspective.
Yes, of course. Around the 8th month of pregnancy, somewhere 7.5, 8 months, somewhere in there, antibodies, which are made by the immune system to protect you, antibodies that the mother has in her bloodstream begin going into the baby, into the placenta and into the placental blood. Why? Why only just before baby is born? Because mother is prepping the baby's immune system. Okay, baby, here are some antibodies to cats. We have cats at home. They're nice cats, but here's some antibodies to help protect you. Or, okay, baby, here's some antibodies to mold. We live in an area with a lot of trees, and the leaves fall down and they decay, and there's mold in the air. So here's some antibodies so that you don't have to freak out when we bring you home, because baby is being prepared for the environment that baby's going to live in. And what environment is that? Mom's environment. So whatever mom is making in terms of antibodies to protect herself, she's going to give those to baby. And it's only one type, they're called IgG. Only the IgG antibodies go into baby before baby is born. And for the first 6 months of life, the antibodies in baby's body are higher. The percentage are mother's antibodies, and still coming from the breast milk now. Mother's antibodies in baby's blood after birth are higher because baby's immune system is still learning how to make antibodies. And at about 6 months, baby's on its own. But mom is prepping baby in utero. So if mom has elevated antibodies to wheat, because mom has a sensitivity to wheat and she's still eating wheat because it doesn't make her sick and she doesn't know, or, you know, I get a little bloated when I eat a pizza, but I like pizza and it's not too bad. I'm better the next day, so I'm going to eat my pizza. So if mom is living her life like that, around the 8th month of pregnancy, baby starts getting antibodies to gluten or antibodies to other components of wheat. As I said, there are 26 that are tested in the wheat zoomer. So yeah, and breast milk, gluten and wheat proteins come through the breast milk. So if mom is eating wheat while she's breastfeeding, and if mom has a sensitivity to wheat, then baby is getting the immune defense mechanisms, plus baby's getting the wheat proteins. So baby is now born and growing with the sensitivity to wheat. And that is so common with eczema and with breathing difficulties in children. So very, very common that the inflammation that is manifesting in baby's body as skin for eczema, or in their lungs as asthma or wheezing, The inflammation is coming from the food that baby is getting, whether it's in the breast milk or in baby food, if baby has sensitivities to those foods.
Very, very interesting, Dr. Tom. And we've all taken mental notes, and this is very, very helpful. Thank you for this wonderful session. I know we could go on. And like I told you, the hour has just flown by. But I think, Arjun, over to you. And thank you, Ms. Ishi and Dr. Tom. And I look forward to hosting such sessions in the future as well. I think all of us need to learn about this subject. And I think this goes a big way in creating awareness about celiac and about meat-related disorders in our country. A very, very humble, profuse thanks to both of you for having taken the time. Arjun, over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dang, Dr. Bryan, Ms. Khosla. I personally I have no issues with taking another hour for this session. It is extremely informative. And Dr. Bryan, this is our first real interaction as panelists on this particular webinar. But the way you have explained matters, the way you explained things, it is, even though I'm involved in the celiac diagnosis, the work of celiac diagnosis for the last 6 to 7 years, the way you have explained things today to us, to our audience here, to the layman, as I would call it, very enlightening. And trust me, I have a ton of questions. Ready in the waiting to be asked. But we're on a timeline here, right? We're on a timeline here, and as it so happens, time flies when you're having a great time, right? This is one great session. Ms. Khosla, thank you so much for your time. And trust me, I have tons of questions on how to cheat, how to monitor, is it curable by Ayurveda? I have those questions all lined up, but I will send them to you separately. And Dr. Dang, I think the way you took things around and went from one subject to another, from diagnosis to curative / preventive care with Ms. Khosla, that was enlightening. I really look forward that it's not just about having 4 or 5 of us on board here. I want to ensure that we can go forward as a team, to kind of take things forward in the future. We would like and we would love to host more webinars and such discussions in the future, given your availability and convenience, right? At JMitra, we are very thankful for all of you having been part of this webinar. And as it so happens, the pandemic is still on, and we can't really felicitate you as you would like to, in the traditional Indian style in person. But I will take the opportunity here and I will just give you a little digital presentation, right? Please allow me to do that. Dr. Tom OBryan, thank you, sir. Thank you for your time, your effort, and your enlightening views on demystifying wheat-related disorders, right?
Thank you.
Also the same for, we would have a similar.
I don't know why my mic just got.
Just give me a second. 1 second. Ms. Khosla, thank you very much. And since you are in Delhi NCR, and if you're okay with it, given the pandemic, I'll wear a double mask, I promise. And I will come and deliver your certificate in person to you at a time of your convenience, ma'am.
It would be a pleasure.
Thank you. And of course, not from one Arjun to another, right? From one Arjun to another. Thank you, Dr. Dang. Thank you very much for your time and lovely questions. I look forward to our next interaction, Doctor.
Thank you, Arjun, and a big thanks to Jatin and the entire team for this wonderfully coordinated and organized seminar. And we look forward to such more in the future as well. Thank you, everyone.
And this was a partnership between JMitra & Co. Private Limited and the Celiac Society of India. So let's have the last word from Ms. Anju Khosla. Anju, over to you.
I'm not sure if I'm audible. Am I?
You're audible. Yes, your video is a little patchy, but we'll hear you out.
Oh, she just went mute. Anju, you just went mute. She's on mute.
So Ishi ma'am, I think since Anju is on mute, would you do the honors from the CSI?
Yes. Anju, are you there? I can see her trying. So let me just. Anju, any issues? Technology is sometimes. Well, all I'd like to say is to thank you all, the panelists and the organizers, for doing this. And we have miles to go, but these small efforts will go a long way, particularly when the audiences are so special and medical professionals who can really make the key difference in helping patients understand their health conditions and correlating and joining the dots with their problems. So thank you all. Thank you, Arjun, and Dr. Tom and Arjun Dang, of course. My team, including Anju and Shivani and all the others behind, for helping me with this. And really, I would just say that we should continue to have more initiatives like this to spread the word around. So thank you. And on behalf of the Celiac Society, we wish everybody good health, and anybody who would like to contribute in terms of time or otherwise to the society is more than welcome. We have the Celiac Society website is under restructuring. So there is a number and an email ID in case you'd like to leave a message. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day, and we look forward to joining us on the next JMitra online webinar. Thank you.